G'day, how you doing? Adam Williams here from Easy Way Photography. In this Behind the Layers video, we're going to take a closer look at how this file here, there's the raw file there, ended up becoming this finished photograph there. Okay, so raw file and the finished file. And what I'm hoping to highlight in a lot of these Behind the Layers videos, where we look at my raw file and step all the way through to my finished file, is the fact that the majority of my workflow is very simple, very basic techniques. You can see the layers over here on the right. There's quite a few, but there's nothing complex there. They're all very easy to follow, simple adjustment layers, and the majority of the mask work is all soft brush work, okay? So no complex masking, no tricky techniques, just simple basic techniques that all come together to create these high impact finished images. And I guess given that fact that the workflow is very simple, and I'm using the same techniques that the majority of you guys already know, even if you're at the beginner or intermediate level, one thing that I would like to highlight is that we need to know or have some direction of where we're going to enhance the image. So if we look at this raw file right here, we've got this beautiful stormy cloud. We've got some light that was coming in from the right hand edge here, although it's not overly highlighted in the raw file here, but there was this beautiful golden light coming from the right. And we've got this nice subject, this kind of large hill or mountain or bluff if you like here. And this can be quite an important step defining your vision, because it basically gives you direction in what you're going to do when you're post-processing this image. So for me, I'd like to see this beautiful golden light kind of hitting at the right-hand side of this mountain and streaming across the image. I really want to intensify the mood of the sky. And I really want to draw the viewer's attention into my main subject, which is the mountain here. And if we look at the finished file, okay, we have that really intense dramatic sky, which is essentially just added a little bit of contrast and not much more really. And then we've really built up the light streaming in from the right hand side, and you can see the way it's hitting this mountain, or the way that I've processed it so that it's really defining and giving this mountain volume with the shadows on the left and the light on the right. Okay, so I'm really enhancing the great light that was already in the scene. Okay, so let's take a look at the layers and just see these steps that I've gone through and kind of talk about the vision and what I was thinking at the time as we step through these layers. Okay, so the very first layer here, you can see I have a curves layer. If I turn that on, you can see it's just adding that drama to the sky, which I talked about being one of the points of my vision. And if I hold down the Option or the Alt key and click on the mask, you can see we've created essentially a sky mask, and then I've brushed away a little bit of that left-hand side there. And that would have just been created by the Quick Selection tool. Just click on that Quick Selection tool and we can very quickly make selections like so. Now there are a few refining techniques to the Quick Selection tool, so I highly recommend that you take a look at the Quick Selection tutorial to get those refining techniques down. However, you can see how simply we can select a sky like that. Moving up, if I click on the next curves layer, we can see that it is a brightening layer up here in that properties panel. And it's been clipped down so that it only affects the layer below. So it's only going to brighten the sky and not the foreground. Okay, so just adding a little bit more light to the sky. The very next layer, we have a hue saturation layer. If I turn that on, you can see it's just taking a little bit of the blue out of the sky. And you can see in the master menu that's the case. We haven't changed anything in the master panel. But if we click on the blues, you can see that saturation slider is down at -42, and probably the cyans, no, just the blues there at -42. You can see taking a little bit of that blue out of the sky, giving me a more grey, more realistic sky, I think. Moving up to the next layer, you can see I've begun darkening down some areas. In particular, I can see there's a bottom right corner here, which is a little bit brighter than the rest of the image, maybe lacking kind of the nice tonal gradients that I like to see. I kind of like my gradients to fade a little bit more smoothly than that. You can see it's quite dark here, transitioning to quite light there. So you can see that layer there takes care of that and also darkens down some other areas. Moving up, we've got a solid color black layer. And if I turn that on, you can see it's number one controlling this top right corner. Okay, taking a bit of brightness out of there, matching it more so into the rest of the top of the image there. And we've also started building up some shadows on the back of the hill here. And once again, if I hold down Option and click on the mask, just a really nice soft brush mask there. Now the reason for using solid color black to darken is that it creates the shadows much more naturally than what a darkening curve does. So you can see I've sort of started to create those shadows there and also used it, as I said, to control that top right corner. Moving up to the next, we've got a slight contrast boost, starting to build up the effect of that light in the foreground there. And then moving up again, another contrast boost, this time to the sky. Okay, so really working to that vision of increasing the light, that beautiful light in the foreground here, adding volume to my main subject, and also adding drama to the sky. And just before we move on, you can see there's a little icon to the right of the layer here. That's indicating that I've used Blend If. If I double click in that area and bring up the Blend If panel here, you can see I've taken that effect out of the brightest of the highlights there. Okay, so that would be where we started at. And all I've done is hold down Option or Alt and split those sliders, and it just takes that contrast effect out of the brightest highlights. I'm going to click Cancel so that we don't change what I've already done. Moving up, we have a solid color layer in soft light here. I'll turn that on. And actually, just moving back, I didn't mention that this solid color black layer is in the normal blend mode at 50% roughly opacity. Okay, so that creates really nice shadows in normal blend mode and 50% opacity. Moving back up to this next solid color layer in soft light, you can see it's just a subtle warming of that particular image there. Moving up to hue saturation, you can see by the white mask here that it's a global, it's affecting the entire image, and we've just dropped the saturation by 18 points. Now as we add contrast throughout this image, it tends to increase the saturation, so basically this is just a controlling layer to control the saturation levels within the image after all those contrast boosts. Moving up, a very tiny contrast boost there. You can see just affecting the foreground, still just building up that effect of light washing across the front of this scene here. Again, another contrast boost. Going by the mask, it's just over in this left-hand side this time. So let's turn that on. Again, just giving that kind of sunlit effect across the tops of those grasses. Moving up. Another, what have we got here? Just a brightening layer. So this time we're just brightening. Once again, just a soft brush mask there. And it's actually taking away a little bit of the shadow, but in actual fact, making the shadow that I have there now look a little bit more realistic. We have another solid color layer here. Okay. If you can see here, there's a really washed out section of those dry grasses. And all I've done here is added a warm solid color layer in the soft light blend mode to bring those grasses in line with the coloring of the rest of the grasses there. Moving up, we have hue saturation. And what is this doing exactly? Let me just have a look at that mask. Oh, okay, right over in that corner. Oh, it's just basically taking a little bit of that blue kind of wash that I can see there and just neutralizing that to grey. We have a photo filter here, not something I use a great deal. You can see I've checked the color marker and we have the density at 44%. So it's just adding a slight kind of warmth again to the majority of the image. Another hue saturation layer, once again globally, and once again controlling the saturation levels after we've boosted all of that contrast. So you can see here the adjustment layers are very simple. A lot of curves, the odd hue saturation layer to control the color, and the odd solid color layer for adding a little bit of color wash here and there. Let's keep moving on. You can see we have another contrast layer. Okay, really punching that contrast up there. Okay, so really getting that light effect, the drama in the sky. It's really getting quite close. And that's just a case of, once again, we just add a curves layer. And in this case, it's just something like this. I have added a third point in the middle, and yeah, it's just to tone down the clouds a little, I guess. Something like that. In actual fact, it's also in luminosity blend mode. Okay, so you can see those colors getting a little bit crazy in the normal blend mode, but if we switch that over to luminosity, they get much more natural, although the colors will start to wash out a little bit. Okay, with the luminosity blend mode, the colors will wash out a bit. With the normal blend mode, the colors will intensify a bit. Just delete that layer. Clicking back on that curves in luminosity blend mode. So it's a good idea when you're doing aggressive contrast adjustments to try that luminosity blend mode. Moving up, another hue saturation layer. This time, looks like it's just affecting the blues in the sky again. Okay, yeah, so the cyans at -43 and the blues at -52. And if we turn that on and off, there it is before, and then if I turn that back on, you can see that's removing a lot of that blue from the sky. It's something that's a little bit of a personal preference for me, and that is to keep my skies relatively grey rather than having that really kind of cyan blue tinge in these overcast skies. Moving up again, another simple curves layer, and we're just dabbing in some of that light. You can see there's some dark kind of vignetted edges down the bottom here, and we're just balancing those tonalities out a little bit. We have another solid color black, this time in 68% in normal blend mode at 68% opacity. And you can see it's just controlling this bright area on the right there. Now, our viewer's eye will be drawn to the brightest area, the areas of high contrast, and the most colorful areas. So given this is one of the more brighter sections of the image, and I don't really think it helps tell the story that I'm trying to tell. It's a little bit of a distraction there, and I don't really want my viewers wandering there and taking a whole lot of notice. So I've just used this solid color black layer to dull that off, allowing more of the attention to come back onto the subject and the story. Moving up, you can see we've got a group here with a solid color grey layer in 26% opacity, just in a grey there. And you can see we've created a sky mask there, so to contain this grey effect just into the sky. And then we've added that layer into a group, the reason being that I can then brush onto another mask without affecting the sky mask here. So it's basically masking a mask. So for example, let's delete this group for a second. Just the group only. And you can see we now have this grey, solid color grey in 26%, kind of washing out the entire sky there, reducing the contrast. And in actual fact, I only really want it on the horizon a little bit. And we have this nice mask here, and I don't really want to paint directly onto that mask. I'd rather preserve that mask. So all we do, let me just go back to normal, is with that layer selected, we hold down Shift and click on the group icon at the bottom of the page. It looks like a little folder icon. That will place that particular selected layer inside a group. I can then move down and add a new layer mask to that group and press Command Invert. We can then go ahead and paint in those lower areas of that sky, getting that look that we're after. And we don't have to be concerned about painting over the foreground because that's protected by the mask on the actual layer itself. And this secondary mask is just allowing us to essentially mask the mask below. Okay, so this particular layer mask is allowing the grey layer to go through to the entire sky. Okay, so that's allowing that to go through to the entire sky. However, when we mask the mask, it's only allowing the effect to go through to the areas of the sky that are being painted through here in white. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of complex, but you'll see that that effect is only in the sky within the regions that I've painted here. We have another solid color black layer. This time the opacity is at 32%, so you can see I vary that a little bit, usually around 50%, but you can see that varies depending on the look. And it's applying that to all of the image except this kind of area where the light is streaming through. And it's sort of lowering the contrast and giving us that dark, kind of stormy feel to the sky and the foreground there. Moving up, a very slight contrast adjustment via a curves layer. Hardly noticeable. Again, we're getting quite small refinements now as we get towards the end. We have a little curves layer here, just brightening up that dark section of the sky there. Okay, just balancing that out. Once again, that really dark area is forming an area of contrast, kind of dark clouds in front of the light clouds. So that potentially could be drawing the viewer's eye, and again, I don't want it to go there, so I just balance those tonalities out a bit better. Moving up, again, a very fine adjustment, again, just darkening down this bright area on the right here, trying to make that less obvious to my viewer's eye. And then I've gone ahead and added a blank layer in the darken blend mode, okay, and then darkened off that area with a clone stamp. So let me just turn that off. So the way I would do that, I'm still not happy with this area here. I would like that to be a little bit darker. So I've gone and added a brand new blank layer. I changed the blend mode of that blank layer to darken. And then we press S for clone stamp. And maybe I'll just lower that opacity a little bit. And we choose an area of that kind of dark cloudy sky there. And I'll paint over this area here. So I'm using, yes, it's something like that. Okay. I've then gone and used Blend If to take it out of the brightest areas of the foreground there. So if we zoom in, you can see that layer that I've just painted is also contaminating some of those bright grasses there. If I double click on the blank space of the layer to go to Blend If, we can use this bottom slider here and see how I can take it out of some of those grasses. And if I hold down Option or Alt and split that aside, we can take it out like so. If you're not familiar with Blend If, it's a really powerful tool, so make sure you take a look at the Blend If tutorials. Once again, I'll delete that layer. However, you can see what I've done is a bit too dark there, so I've added a curves mask and clipped it down to that blank layer, which is just brightening that area up and matching the tonality of the surrounding area there. And the very last layer, I've gone and done an auto curves. I often do an auto curves right at the very end just to see if it's not a slight improvement on my editing. And you can see it gives it a little bit more punch and a little bit more brightness kind of streaming or flowing out of this image. And you can also see that I've used blend if. I double click there, you'll see that I've just taken that auto curves effect away from the brightest highlights. Okay, so that was the effect here. And keep your eye on these bright grasses here. And you can see that effect is just pulling out of those brightest grasses. It's just stopping those really bright grasses from being brightened beyond the point that I would like them to be. Clicking OK. So I've gotten to this point, and this would have been the point where I was quite happy. And then I've saved the image, and at a later date I've moved on to this edit here. Okay, so we'll go through that edit. But first of all, you'll notice that the form of the image has changed. Okay, this one is much squarer, the mountain is a little taller, and all that I've done is compressed this scene here. So the way that I go about doing that is to merge up all of my layers to one layer with all the information first. So a merged up copy layer. On a Mac we press Command, Option, Shift, E, like so, making sure that we had the top layer selected so that it merges all those layers up. And you can see we get this merged up layer. To create that on a PC, that would be Control, Alt, Shift and E. Okay, and that creates that layer. And I'm looking at compressing this image into a square format image, which is going to give that mountain a little bit more prominence and also have the image in that nice square format. The easiest way I find is to click on the crop tool first, and we'll type in that 1:1 square ratio. Okay, don't worry too much, I'm just coming inside those lines there. Okay, so something like that, with that mountain right in the middle, my subject right in the middle there. Click OK. And that's going to give me that really nice square crop that I'm looking for. However, all of the details that I want aren't within the image. So with that top merged up copy selected, we press Command or Control T for free transform, and we can just squish that in. So you can see that square ratio is being maintained. Something like that. And something like that. Happy with that. Click the check mark. And you can see we've gone from that point there, and we've now got this really beautiful square ratio image where the subject is a little bit more prominent, I feel. Okay, not for everyone, but I feel for me that is a slight improvement by compressing that scene a little bit. Moving over to the layer file section 2, so chapter 2, you can see this is our starting point, which is essentially the end point of the last image. And we're just doing some very fine finishing adjustments. Okay, so I've come back to the image and I thought maybe a little bit more tweak could just improve this a little more. So the first one, we've used the detail extractor within NickFX. Okay, so NickFX is a free software which installs under your filter menu. You can see it just there, the Nick collection. And within there, there's a detail extractor. And I've just used that just to grab and extract a little more detail out of the top of this mountain here, okay? Giving it more of that kind of sunlit effect and giving the subject a little extra volume. Now all I would have done, we would have just probably had the background layer by itself at the time. I've just pressed Command J to duplicate that, and then up to the filter menu, Nick Collection, Color Effects Pro. Just takes a second to load. I can click on the detail extractor, which is already loaded, and I can click on the little sort of icon to the right, which will give me the different options, and I can choose which option. You can see they get very wild and quite ugly actually, if you ask me. So generally I'm just using the very subtle first one and only using it in the small areas that I feel I need it, which was up in this top corner here. I'll just cancel out of that. and delete that layer. And you can see that's the effect that we ended up getting, just that small detail there. Moving up, we just have another contrast boost via a curves layer, mainly in the sky, looking at that mask there. Again, just soft brush. Okay, just adding to the drama of the sky by adding a little bit more contrast into there. Moving up again, we've just lightened up specific areas. Okay, just getting a little bit more kind of tonal balance. You can see there's a dark patch just here and another one just here. Just balancing those tonalities a little bit. Next up, I've just merged those layers together. This is a merged up copy layer, and I would have done that so that I could use again the Nik effects here. So you can see that's not doing anything. But then as we move up, you can see we have a glamour glow layer. Okay, which is just kind of adding that kind of slight glow effect, which is really in vogue at the moment. I don't use a lot of it, but I think it's quite nice in this particular image. And then you can also see on the very last layer here, we've used a skylight filter also from Nik Effects. And I think that is the cherry on top, this skylight filter in this particular image. It's giving it a beautiful skylit or sunlit glow to all of that foreground and just warming up the sky ever so slightly and tying the entire image together. You can see the mask here is a little bit different. We've used the quick selection tool to select the foreground. Okay, and then we've used this density slider. And if we slide that density slider, that would have been the original mask. Okay, so none of that skylight effect in the sky and 100% in the foreground basically. And it looks like that. Okay, but it doesn't really tie itself together. So we want a little bit of that skylight filter in the sky as well. And the way we can do that, let's just go back to the mask, is to use the density slider. And you can see we can allow kind of an opacity change to the top, to the blacks in this particular mask. Okay, so allowing them to be mid-grey at 50% is allowing 50% of that look of the skylight filter into the sky region. And those two last effects that we've used here, the glamour glow and the skylight filter, are both found in the filter menu under the Nik Collection and Color Effects Pro. So it's worth having a little experiment with that. The one thing that I will mention when using plugins like Nik FX, or I also use another one there called Alien Skin Exposure 7, which is quite handy too. The one thing I will mention with using these particular techniques is try not to rely on them from the beginning. I highly recommend that you go through and edit your entire image till you think you're finished, till you've got that look that you think you're after, and then use these Nik FX filters just at the end to see if you can get that extra little something out of your image. I think potentially relying on them from the very beginning is a kind of a dangerous path to go down, okay? Because you're going to fall into that comfort zone on just relying on these filters, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to create your own style of image. So go through and process your entire image first, and then just see if you can add an extra 5 or 10% to the look of your image by using some of these special filters there. Once again, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope it kind of opened up an avenue where you can see that very simple techniques can create high impact images. Okay, there's nothing wrong with using technical or complicated techniques either, but I just wanted to show you with a little bit of vision and some very simple techniques you can create high impact images. So there's our finished image there, and if we click back here, let's take a look. There's our raw file to begin with, and that's what we ended up doing with. I hope you found that interesting. Thank you once again for watching along, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Bye for now.